Oh. Satchidananda Rupaya Vishwotpatyadi Hetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadyasya yatonvayaditaratascharteshvabhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yatsuryaha Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Dharma Projita Ketavotra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Vaparerishwaraha Sadyo Hridya Varudyate Trakritibihi Shushrushubistatkshanah. Hari Om and greetings from Cleveland. Puja Swami Tejo Mayananda has shared, don't tell God how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big your God is. Tell your problems how big your God is. And what's awesome about this in Sanskrit, our word for God is Brahman, which means bigness, the biggest. And this is a deep thought because we all have problems. We have physical problems, financial problems, internet problems, teacher problems. We all have problems. But the only solution is to feel that God is with you, to feel that God is within you. In our assembly right now, I encouraged everyone, particularly the children. They were sitting quietly, and I said, feel your breath. Deeper than that, feel your heartbeat. Deeper than that, feel your life. We use words like existence, awareness for life. For a child, maybe life is more easy to understand. So for all of us, when we are feeling overwhelmed by problems, it's because we've forgotten what the solution is. In Vedanta and Bhagavata, there's a singular teaching message to belong to Bhagavan, to be Bhagavan. The 11th skanda begins with intense negativity. There are fights. Shri Krishna has directly and indirectly shared that I'm dissolving my name, my form. Rishi Uddhava is sensitive to this and shares, I want to come with you. And Bhagavan Krishna shares, you can't come with me the way you think you're going to come with me. I'm not going to an orientation based on time, space, and matter. I am returning to my nature which is existence, awareness, joy. That is not a going, that is a returning, a realizing. Rishi Uddhava is sincere, so Bhagavan doesn't just shut him down. He shares, you can come with me by being me. And he begins to teach him how to be himself, how to be Sri Krishna. In our Upanishad, we share Brahmavit, Brahmeva Bhavati, the one who knows infinity is infinity. In the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Krishna is singing, and if Prince Arjuna follows this song, then he'll follow the author where that song is coming from. And that is the focus of the 11th skanda. It is not as enjoyable for most people because it's about teachings. We like to know the lessons, the episodes of Sri Krishna's life, but who's the teacher in this skanda? It is Sri Krishna. It is not enough to love his life. One also has to love his teaching. So many love Sri Krishna, but they don't love Bhagavad Gita. How does that make sense? In the 23rd chapter, Bhagavan Krishna is speaking to Rishi Uddhava. In the previous chapters, he's communicating to Rishi Uddhava that labels keep you stuck in the relative, keep you stuck in the world. This is why Vivek doesn't wear name brand clothing. It keeps me stuck in the relative in the world. That one has to rise above labels. And Rishi Uddhava thinks this is too hard. So Bhagavan Krishna shares a katha of one who was stuck in labels, but then rose above labels. This all happened in Avantika. What is the modern day name for Avantika? Ujjain. That is where Bhagavan Krishna went to the Gurukula. Sandipani's ashram is there. For all of you who are going to be coming to the conference that I'm organizing in December, it will be in Ujjain. We will go to Rishi Sandipani's ashram. There was a Brahmana who studied the Veda, and he was lucky. He was well-to-do. There was a lot of prosperity that was privileged upon him, but he didn't act in how a Brahmana should be. A Brahmana is one who studies the Veda, and then what do? They share this. They share this freely. But he didn't. He was a hoarder. What do they call those people on those TV shows that have a lot of stuff? Hoarders, right? They're called that. We came across an asura who hoarded. Do you remember who that asura was in Skanda 10? Dhenuka. Do you know what shape Dhenuka was? What kind of animal she was? A donkey. So those who are hoarders, they're called this in Hindi. I've forgotten what that word is. What is that word? I think it's gada, correct? I'm only speaking language. I don't mean anyone is. I'm only using language. And so what happened to this Brahmana who didn't share freely? The privilege of prosperity he had was taken from him. And all of the people that he should have helped, they started to harm him. Now, one thought that I didn't share in the last class, there's a really powerful verse in this chapter. It is verse 18. In this, Sri Krishna shares the one who is a hoarder. Another word for this is one who is greedy. then they experience anartha. Anartha means they experience calamity. They experience destruction. Specifically, steyam himsanratam dambaha kama krodasmayo madaha bhedo vairam avishvasaha samsparda vyavasanicha. For those who are hoarders, those who are greedy, this is what they experience. And I think we know these words. Steya, one becomes like a thief, someone who steals. Himsa, they become cruel. Anartham, they're deceitful. Dambaha, they're dumb. They're pretentious. Kamaha, desirous. Krodaha, angry. Smayo, they're prideful. Madaha, they're arrogant. Beda, they're always focusing on separation. And I shared this in Meaningful Mornings. Where there's separation, what comes next? Comparison. What comes after that? Competition. What comes after that? Jealousy. And finally, this ends with insecurity. And this is beautifully shared here. Vairam means they have this enmity towards others. They're mean. Avishvasaha, they don't trust. They're suspicious. Samsparda, they're jealous. And vyasana, they're addicted. Shri Krishna shares, ete panchadasha narthaha. These are 15 ways that one starts to feel calamity or destruction. Now, when Vivek analyzed this verse, I only counted 13. 13 steps down. And so it makes me think what I just shared about someone who's a hoarder, is someone who becomes greedy, and then this happens. I'm sharing this with you because if you think of many movies you've seen where outer security is a priority, this is what happens. We see it in movies, it's being shared in the scripture. Then why even flirt with this idea that you can be secure through externalities? Then we start to have the right relationship with resources. This Brahmana, he had studied the Veda like all of us. But when all of this was taken away, he had nothing to depend on externally, so he started to depend on himself. He openly acknowledges it is through grace that he started to practice what he had studied. For all of us, we've been studying Vedanta, at least in this community, for 8.5 years. And that moment, when you start to practice this, that is grace upon you, that is grace inside of you. I've shared with all of you in so many ways that grace is felt as guidance, where there's an emphasis on practice, practicality. And so this Brahmana does start to practice what the Veda teaches, to depend on oneself. And he goes on to share with all of the people whom he didn't help and are now harming him. Do you remember how they harmed him? I specified, and Sheila and I were laughing about this. Durvata. What was the English word for Durvata? Foul air. You know what foul air is. That they were questioning him. How is it that you're not reacting? How are you not stuck in the relative? And he goes on to share a Gita, a song. This is known as Bhikshu Gita. Again, this is verses 43 to 58, 16 verses, where this Bhikshu in Srimad Bhagavatam, he's called a Dvija. What is the English word for Dvija? Someone who's twice born. I believe in some other religions, one is twice born too, but you see the Sanskrit source of all of this. And I like this word Dvija. Birds are also called Dvija. First, they're born into an egg, and then they fly. That's their second birth. Our teeth are called Dvija. You have your baby teeth, and then you have your adult teeth. Your dentures don't count. So he's called a Dvija, and he's speaking to the Praja. And before I get into some more insights about this, I want to give you some more context. In this chapter, there's a lot of teachings about as you associate, so you think. As you think, so you develop. Remember that scheme. Associate, think, develop. For those who came to our workshop last night, the theme was how to instill pride in Sanatana Dharma for a younger generation. And one of the final points I made was exposure. Exposure at a family level, community level, and societal level. And I specifically shared at a community level for the younger generation to feel associated with an organization, to feel associated with an ashram. This association leads to thinking, leads to developing. Bhagavan Krishna started this teaching on association with sattva. He said, if you associate with sattva, you will think and develop into this. Do you remember the 10 directions of sattva? Agama, apa, what you read, what you drink. But then he goes on to share association with sadhus. And maybe Rishi Uddhava, like us, we have a prejudice to whom a sadhu is. We think a sadhu is determined by your exterior, like the length of your hair or your gender or your age. But here Sri Krishna is sharing, a sadhu is one who treats those who treat them poorly with kindness. If someone is kind to me, it is easy to be kind back. If someone is mean to me, if I'm kind back, then I'm a sadhu. Now, if you wear yellow clothes, does that make you more kind? If you didn't brush your teeth today, does that make you more kind? That's a weird example, but you get my point. It's not external. It is internal. So Shri Krishna is showing showing Rishi Uddhava. He's showing an example of this. When you connect all of these dots, this shows how much Bhagavan Krishna loves us. He's showing proof that there are people who live like this. I am reading or rereading the 44th verse. Bhikshu Gita, 16 verses, I'm reading one of them. Mano gunan vei srijate baliyaha tatascha karmani vilakshanani shuklani krishnan yatalohitani tebhyasa sritayo bhavanti. I've already taught this. I'm sharing this in a more simple way. In Bhikshu Gita, this Brahmana shares that none can cause one sorrow, only one's mind can cause them sorrow. No planet, no person, nothing can cause you sorrow. Only your own mind can cause you sorrow. What an empowering message. because automatically I stop complaining, blaming, annotating. I start to take responsibility for my sorrow. I start to follow Dharma. So far, so good? Okay. Sharing some more insights. This bhikshu says, for the person who thinks that there's an outside cause for their sorrow, they identify with their body a lot. They're an exterior person, an extrovert person. And because they feel that they're this body, they feel that another is their body, and so conflict goes on. But just think, when you are dreaming and sleeping, you don't identify with your body. There's no conflict then. Yes? Our older son Vyasa, whom many of you know, he is not an affectionate child. Shuka's the opposite. And so at night, I've been sleeping with Vyasa while we've been traveling, and I was telling him this morning, Vyasa, when I come to sleep with you, I always ensure one of my body parts is touching your body parts. That way you know I'm there. And then I said, also because you're not affectionate, and this is my opportunity. But see, the point is when he's dreaming and sleeping, he doesn't identify with his body. So there's no conflict there. You're feeling me. This bhikshu is connecting so many dots in this skanda. Bhagavan Krishna has shared, first you have to direct your mind, and after that you have to transcend your mind. We have already explored this in the 9th skanda in terms of vasanas. First, you have to engage in vasana kshaya, which means you have to lighten your ego. And then after that, vasana nasha, you have to go beyond your ego. In the Bhagavad Gita, when we get to chapter 14, I'll remind you of this. Bhagavan Krishna shares, first you have to be sattvic, and in the following mantra he says, then you have to be udasina, which means you have to be more than the gunas. We have to really work with our mind, not with the planets, not with people. Work with your own mind, and then be more authentic and deep to get to the spirit. Puja Swami Tejramananda gave such lovely revelations about Bhikshu Gita. He said that in the effect, the cause is there. So now, when something doesn't go my way, I'm feeling that effect, I'm angry. The cause is in that effect. I'm feeling angry, but where is that anger? In the mind. So Guruji's teaching here is, when you are experiencing an effect, don't treat that casually, contemplate on it. Find out why that's happening. And he further shared, when you do something and you don't get it the way you wanted it, what do you do with that result or that phala? You start to label it. The result is not the problem, it's the labeling of the result that causes us problems. Labels like, this is good and that's bad. Just think of food. Later on, we're going to be eating here. Suppose you had the vigilance of mind not to label food as tasty and not tasty, then you're just eating food, even more than that, energy, correct? You become so independent. The final thought I have to share here is this bhikshu who's speaking to the praja, adopting this discipline of subsistence in the Supreme Self, following the example of great rishis of the past, and taking to the service of the feet of the worshipful Mukunda, I shall soon get across the limitless expanse of the darkness of ignorance. This is the final verse of Bhikshu Gita. All of these prajas, these people who are astounded by him about how balanced he is, he shares with them, this is how you can be balanced also. If you want to be like me, I'm trying to be like Bhagavan Krishna, so you become or try to become like Bhagavan Krishna too. After Bhikshu Gita ends, Bhagavan Krishna describes this bhikshu a little bit more in verse 59. Thus did that mendicant proclaim, on losing all his wealth and thereby attaining complete dispassion and freedom from all worldly cares. This is the important point. Though insulted and persecuted by evil beings, he roamed over the land without budging even an inch from his characteristic ways of life in the face of all these provocations and difficulties. What I'm trying to share here is, it doesn't matter what the context is. If you are a seeker, if you want to be a seeker like this bhikshu, your sadhana, your relationship with the divine, cannot be affected. And I see this a lot with people who travel. What happens to their sadhana? Their sadhana stops. I see this a lot with people who are busy. When they're busy, what happens to their sadhana? It stops. The English word for sadhana is self-love. If you stop loving yourself, how will you love those who are mean to you? You will only be kind to those who are kind to you. That is not being a sadhu. That is being a vanik. You know what vanik means? A merchant. You give me this, I give this back to you. This chapter ends with, whoever hears with faith and devotion this song of the mendicant, dealing with the subject of establishment in Brahman, or makes others hear it and themselves constantly think over it, will not be overcome by the contradictions, the labels of life. I can't think of a better investment in any direction than what we do together, where you stop being touched by the relative. This chapter is very much about how titiksha leads to sthane. Endurance leads to acceptance. When the world is bothering you, engage. Where your head is, bring your hands there. Where your hands are, bring your head there. Then you don't overthink. Why did this happen to me? Why is that person behaving that way? Engage. More refined than that is chant. As someone's insulting you with criticism, what are you chanting in your mind? Om Namo Narayanaya. So they're saying you're a gada, but what you're feeling is Narayana. And even more refined than that is observe. While we've been traveling to Cleveland and being in Cleveland, I've observed with myself how the noise that my children make affects me unnecessarily. It affects Sheila less. That means I have to do better with observing. When they fight, when they break things that are not mine, I shouldn't care. I should observe more. So now that's just outer noise. We have to observe the inner noise too. My mind is way louder than any family member, friend, and so on. Is that a good analysis explanation of chapter 23? Okay. Now, before we get to chapter 24, as I was preparing for today's class and chapter, I was feeling very sad. I was feeling very emotional to the extent of I had to stop myself to be able to continue with reading and writing and now reflecting with you. Today, we are experiencing 4.5 years of Srimad Bhagavatam. Today, we are experiencing the 148th hour, not class, not minute, but hour of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the 11th skanda out of 12. And we are now in the final 8 classes. And in these final 8 classes, we will take up a chapter. And these final 8 chapters are Bhagavan Krishna's final 8 chapters. And that's why I was feeling sad, is that for so long, years and hours, what we're doing together is we're being with Bhagavan. His life, now his teachings. And also, I was so clear about how much Bhagavan loves us. Before I went to the Vedanta course, the months leading up to that, I was working frantically that all of my responsibilities should be passed on in an organized way, primarily to my parents. Sheila and I were not married at the time, so that wasn't going to happen. But to my parents, this is my bank account password. This is the last time I changed the oil on your car. So I had to create all of these documents and so on, because I wanted this transition to be smooth. Bhagavan Krishna is frantically teaching Rishi Uddhava everything he needs to know before Bhagavan is not there anymore. Chapter by chapter, he's taking up subjects that will help Rishi Uddhava and us continue to feel the presence of Bhagavan. This next chapter is a technical one on Sankhya. Sankhya means Samkhya, which means well counted, well analyzed. So we don't get lost in this technicality. Really, the vision of this chapter is the more you know creation in detail, the more you know there is more to creation, that there is consciousness. That is the vision of this chapter. If you don't understand anything else that I share, courtesy of Bhagavan, all of these details are given to point out to us that there has to be that which is holding this together. And that is consciousness. I won't be able to get into this chapter because we don't have enough time and it is technical. So I've given you the vision. The 2 verses I am going to teach next week, I'm telling you this in advance so you can do your own research. It is verse 3 and verse 17. In verse 3, Bhagavan Krishna shares with Rishi Uddhava that oneness feels as two-ness because of Maya. Oneness gets divided into a subject and object because of avidya. Avidya means ignorance or forgetting oneness. When you forget consciousness, what are you always thinking about? Creation. And in verse 17, Bhagavan Krishna shares, he gives this lovely way to think about your experience with creation. What's there in the beginning and what's there at the end also has to be there in the middle. You have gold in the beginning, it turns into an ornament, and when it's melted down again, it becomes gold. It was there in the beginning, was there in the end. So really, what was it in the middle? Gold. There is existence in the beginning, there's existence in the end. What is it that we're all experiencing and are? existence. And Bhagavan gives such a lovely detail here. He says, when this body dies, the body will become food, food will become seeds, seeds will become the earth. The earth becomes seeds, which becomes food, which becomes this body. So who are you and I finally? Earth. Is how you look so important? Is how the body feels so important? If you serve earth, you're serving all bodies. But connect this back. Earth depends on existence. Existence depends on none. So if you depend on existence, you become independent. This is what is shared in 24. I'll elaborate on this and chapter 25. Next week, I'm going very slow now. I purposefully brought us to these last chapters to feel Bhagavan's love, to be moved by how Bhagavan's preparing us for him not to be with us externally. Oh.